that will never stop freaking me out. That person saying this meeting will be recorded is being recorded. Like, I get it, legal purposes, and they're covering their bases, but it always fucking weirds me out.
It's the evil Siri.
Yeah, that's Bill Gates. That's what's in the vaccine.
That's crazy. Have you been vaccinated yet?
Huh? No, I haven't, but I'm not sure if I want to or not yet. I'm still on the fence.
But you know, that's almost as bad as saying that you don't want it, is saying that you're on the fence. I'm very much on the fence with a lot of things. Tory Lanez, Meg Thee Stallion, on the fence. The vaccine, very much so on the fence. It's just like, I'm not anti-vax. You'll never see me protest with the White Lives Matters guys. But at the same time, it's like, I'm seeing a lot of fucked up shit that's happening from the vax, and maybe I'm ill-informed, or maybe I'm only looking to some propaganda and whatever else. But at the same time, it's like, I'm pretty healthy, and I'm pretty sure I got COVID at the beginning of 2020. There, I said it. So like, for me, it's like, it is what it is. Like, I'm not pressed to get it.
This is what I like about you, man. You speak your mind, and that's okay. And I'll get into what we're going to start with. But the thing with the G7 that just happened, where like all the world leaders are there without a mask, and they're like bumping elbows, like it was 2011 and you're playing volleyball in junior high and H1N1 was popular, so you had to bump elbows under the net, and I'm like, we all just touched the ball. I don't see how, whatever, it's cool. Except Justin Trudeau was there with a mask. I'm like, dude, nobody's fooled by this.
Yeah, but our leader is the biggest simp there is. And speaking of simps, this is what we're going to start off with. So now I was supposed to be a guest on the Winnipeg's Finest pod last year, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
And you tell me what happened, what transpired. Why was I not a guest on your podcast?
So this is actually, I was going to introduce you as the man who not led me to believe, but you're the man who opened my eyes that I wanted to end the podcast, because I wanted to be more not controversial, but like, I like doing what I want, and that usually becomes controversial, or I just like pushing the buttons. I like pushing the envelope. I like seeing how far we can take things. And the Winnipeg's Finest brand was more like positive and uplifting, and I wanted to take more risks with it. So I want to have you on before all this weird Winnipeg Me Too Twitter shit came out. Because I was like, oh, I saw the Tall, Dark, and Ratchet. One of the clips, it was about you saying breasts, and I thought it was so funny. I was like, this guy's hilarious. I asked people around. I was like, is he from Winnipeg? They're like, oh yeah, he's from Winnipeg. He doesn't live here anymore. But I was like, fuck, that's good enough. And I'm a comedian. I like talking to comedians. So I was like, fuck yeah, he'll be on. And then
you got to do a better vetting system. If you're just like, that guy said breasts, I need him on podcast. You got to, find a little bit more research.
I'm a simple man. I am a simple man.
Talking to the simplest of men. So,
and so you got in some, I don't even remember what happened. So basically the Twitter Me Too movement reckoning came down, where like, I literally counted 100 dudes' names being mentioned. This guy raped me. This guy sexually assaulted me. This guy's a rapist. This guy's this. This guy's that. And I was like, I've never seen anything like it. And I think your take on it was, you can't just be like exposing people's names like that. That like, that's going to lead to a lot more trouble than good. And people jumped down your throat for it. And then the team that I was working with were like, no, we can't have Marcel Williams on. That guy's a fucking tool.
Okay, cool. So, to clarify, because those are two different things. So the reason why I got into a Twitter thing was actually had nothing to do with the whole Me Too movement.
Oh, okay. Then I'm misremembering, yeah.
No, but I did actually have a podcast where I made the distinction between the Me Too movement and the Me Also movement.
Because I listened to that. I remember.
I feel as though there's like the Me Too movement, you'd have to be insane to discredit what that means, what it represents, and the importance of the Me Too movement, right? When somebody has the courage to speak against the person who assaulted them, that takes a lot of courage. I'll never downplay that. But there's this other realm of people, this Me Also movement, where they feel like that's their way into being inside of any conversation, is to just have their voice be heard by just throwing out some egregious crime that was taken against them. And this is where I was like, okay, come on, Winnipeg. Like, this is where you're showing your inferiority complex, where you feel like Crystalia has been canceled. So now you want to out all of your nasty motherfuckers that you have in the city, which is valid. If you have a long list, and some of the names I saw in there, I'm like, yeah, I've rubbed elbows with those people in the Winnipeg scene back in the day, and they were kind of slimy back then too. So I get that. But when I saw there was a guy, and this is kind of what kind of threw me over the edge, I was like, there was a dude who was like, there was this one time at this Winnipeg nightclub, I was wearing very tight pants, and the bartender came to me, and I think he put his hand on my cheeks and I felt violated and he kept buying me drinks and he was trying to take advantage of me. I'm like, look, bro, I'm not saying that experience may not have been traumatic, but you can't, like, where's the goalpost of when it becomes something that's super egregious and when it's something that's just like, yeah, okay, that you should take that up with them or you should scrap them or whatever the case is. But like, you can't jumble it all together. You can't put Bill Cosby next to that bartender.
Yeah.
You can't put R. Kelly next to that bartender. So for me, it's like, there needs to be some sort of, differentiation in terms of what it is that you're talking about. So just to kind of scream and say, hey, I've got a story too, just so that you can be included in the conversation, that shit's corny to me.
Yeah, and I think this is something that I bring up with people all the time. The definition of sexual assault to me is frustratingly vague, but at the same time, I understand why it is the way it is. Because if you start to, and the definition is any unwanted touching, basically, like that's sexual assault. I understand why it is, because if you're like, oh, well, it needs to be this situation and this condition, and you start breaking it down, it leaves a lot of loopholes to be like, oh, that didn't happen. You didn't check off that box. Therefore, it's not sexual assault. And anybody with eyes could look at it and be like, no, that's fucked up. That's clearly sexual assault. You can't do that. But at the same time, yeah, I could see that story as to like, did he say like, I think the guy maybe might have? Because if so, it's like,
yeah, there was a lot of just gray area in his story. And you could see that he was just trying to rush it out just to get the retweets and the likes. But now the reason I got canceled on Winnipeg Twitter had nothing to do with that movement, by the way.
Oh, okay.
What it is, and I love the fact that, and I'm going to ask you this question later, is essentially, who do you deem as a person in Winnipeg that the community is currently trying to uplift? But we'll get to that in a second, because
funny you should ask.
Right. So I saw this this tweet thread where, and mind you, this is me showing my age. I hadn't been on Twitter for 7 years at that point. Like I was in the Twitter sphere, like the 2012s, the 2013, and then I just stopped using Twitter because I was like, nah, this isn't really serving me. It's not really, that lit anymore. It was cool when it kind of first came out, right? Mm-hmm. And then when I came back, I was like, yo, why is everyone like jumping down each other's throats? Like, where are the memes? Where's the funny content? So I saw this thread where the same person that the entire community uplifted, they were looking for an excuse to bring them down. So then I threw out a fat joke, which in 2012 Twitter, by the way, would have been lit. However, they took it
2015 Twitter, that would have been lit.
Sure, but they took it upon themselves to be like, well, who is this guy anyways? And is this guy even still relevant? And is somebody come get their uncle? And then it got to the point where for a full 24 hours, they were all trying to flame me. Some people went as far as taking screenshots of my LinkedIn account and showing how bad my commas and punctuation was and shit. They're like, look, this guy can't even use proper grammar. He doesn't know the use of a comma. And then it got to the point where somebody said something even more egregious than what my initial thing was, where somebody was like, we should kneel on his neck like George Floyd. And then everyone fell back. They were like, whoa, okay, maybe we've taken this a little too far. But it's just interesting to me that like you can say something out of pocket just to get a rise out of people. They'll all crucify you until somebody takes it a little too far. And then they're like, okay, we got to find a next victim because this has gone a little too far now.
Okay, this is what I'll say. Like the funny thing about Twitter and podcasts, like I'm sure you remember when Joe Rogan, I mean, he gets canceled every month, but like last summer they were trying to cancel him for a podcast 10 years ago about Joey Diaz talking about how he'd only let women comedians on the show if they'd blow him for coke or something like that. They'd blow him, or like if they gave him coke, like in the 80s. And Joe was laughing at it. People were like, wow, Joe Rogan, you think this is funny? And this is the problem with video content and written content, is there are receipts at all times. However, people can look at something, and if they don't realize the date, or even if they do realize the date, the fact that it's happening right now in front of them, that they're watching it play out in front of them, even if the incident was 10 years ago, or they're reading it right in front of them, it still elicits a reaction. I don't think we have a good enough skill at being able to contextualize, okay, well, what happened? Okay, so the Joey Diaz thing was 40 years ago now. Okay, well, it's clearly wrong. I don't think you should bribe women into sucking you off to get on a comedy show. Yes, that is clearly wrong. I think Joe Rogan laughed about it in 2011. I'm not sure what his explanation behind that reaction is. Maybe he felt nervous. Maybe he was laughing how ridiculous it was. Maybe he actually thinks it's funny and he like is an advocate for rape. Like, I don't know. You know what I mean? But there's like a checklist. There's steps you need to go through in terms of what does this mean? What are they saying? What's actually going on? I don't think we do a good enough job of that.
No, of course not. And I think that's a valid point, is that, you know, what was his sentiment at that point? We're just kind of alluding to the fact that he might have been just laughing because, oh, I know Joey, that actually never really happened. And that could have been it, right? Maybe he's not, you know, validating what he's saying and, you know, supporting it and whatever. But like, people just love to latch on to something negative to almost absolve themselves of whatever guilt that they're holding in as well, right? Because whenever I see somebody who's a little bit too protesty, I start to think like, what demons are you hiding? What skeletons do you have in your closet? And who knows? They could just be some sort of freedom fighter who they were sent on this planet to fight all of the nasty people and sentiments out there in the world. But the optics look kind of nuts when I see you on a platform really leaning into every single cause. And then I'm like, well, if you're standing for all these things, like what does your day-to-day look like? So here's my question as well, right?
Yeah.
And the reason why I go so hard at like simps, right? And to be fair, like I know some people might say, oh, that's an offensive term. And, you know, I don't know, I actually idolize mediocre pussy and all these kind of things. Like for me, and I've said this on my podcast before, and I've even in conversation, I think I might even spoke to you about what I feel like a simp really is, right? My thing is this: if you are caping for all of these different groups, organizations, genders, all these different things, what is your ideal human being? Like, what do you deem to be a good person, right? Because it's one thing to, you know, denounce a lot of, you know, crimes and hatred and, you know, discrimination, all of those things we've known that forever, even before the cancel culture, right? But now it's getting to the point where if you can see that a guy is genuinely pandering into a woman that maybe is out of his league, and you know, he's only saying certain things to really gain that validation and the affirmation from that woman, who am I to not be able to say, like, that motherfucker's a simp? That motherfucker is simping right now. But I look like the crazy person for calling that shit out. And they're like, well, no, what's wrong with today? You're toxic masculinity and all this kind of bullshit. It's like, nah, there's layers to my personality as well. And I feel like there's you could be a gentleman, right? Where, you know, I like to, I respect women. I like to treat women. I like to do all these things. But it gets to a point where, you're displaying a lot of simp and cuck-like behavior, and that shit I just personally like to call it out. I don't think it's a bad person for being that way, but I'm going to call it out.
It's funny that you say that. I was talking to somebody recently about, and this goes on to, fuck, man, I'll send you a video after this. It kind of explains this phenomenon really well. I don't think we understand people very well. Like, when I was telling you what I remember the situation was, and you were like, no, this is what happened. I was like, oh, okay, I misremembered it. A lot of people would be like, oh, so you were in fact fat phobic. Oh, so you do hate fat people. I think we don't understand what people are saying or what they're trying to say. And if they explain themselves, we still latch on to our ideal or what we think they mean or what it says about greater society. So I was talking to one of my friends and we hung out with somebody recently, and the person who we hung out with was like pretty far left. And they were like, I was explaining to them, like, we were talking about masculinity and femininity. And I was like, I don't believe there's anything wrong with masculinity or femininity. I think anything can be toxic, but those traits in and of itself are not toxic. The same way I view water. You need water to fucking live, but if you drink water all fucking day or you drown, that could be bad for you. Like, that could be really bad for you, right? And so I was like, because they were arguing that, like, you know, patriarchy is masculine. And I go, if patriarchy is oppressive and insecure, and I don't care about the whole patriarchy argument. If you want to say it exists, fine. If you don't think it exists, I don't care. But I was like, let's say it exists for hypothetical. It's like, if it is insecure, if it is oppressive, and if it is anti-woman, that's not masculine. That's posturing. That's not what masculinity is. They go, but they're men. I'm like, that's not what I said. They're like, but how can you argue that men aren't masculine? I'm like, I can show you a ton of men who aren't masculine and just posturing. And my point was, I think the left attracts a lot of guys who act like simps and cucks, and the right obviously the extremes. The right attracts those guys who posture and have that, like, hyper aggressive, you have to be manly you need to be, like, super aggressive, and almost violent and just constantly showing off how much of a man you are in order to be that. And they're like, whoa.
You're in a jersey right now. No, I'm just playing.
It's the only good Raptors jersey. The new ones suck. They're terrible. I'm sorry.
Look like you scream at your girlfriend at a resort in Mexico. That's the energy I'm getting from you right now.
Well, it's bold of you to assume that girls want to commit to relationships with me, but thank you.
That's appreciate it. Screaming at them. Why you keep leaving me, mama? Come on. Don't you see me in this Raptors jersey?
Yeah. Pascal, stop spinning. God damn it. Literally, stop. Get a new move. But, and so I was like, yeah, I think the left attracts those simp guys and the right attracts those hyper aggressive guys. It's not masculinity. They're hyper aggressive and insecure. I'm like, whoa, so you're saying guys on the left are simps? I'm like, no, not at all what I just said.
No,
like, it attracts certain qualities. Go ahead.
Right. So going back to where this whole started from in the first place. So now you say it's a team, but I'm very sure that your team consisted of you and your co-host.
Yeah, it was me and my co-host. I just don't want to throw him. Right. I just don't want to throw him under the bus.
But okay, so here's the thing, though, right? I'm looking at these again. So I'm looking. Okay, Bueno reached out to me to be on this podcast. I know I just had this little small spat with Winnipeg Twitter, which really, in the grand scheme of things, is completely irrelevant. But I'm like, okay, so I've never met his co-host a day in my life. At least I have at least kind of grazed each other in comedy rooms and so on and so forth. Yeah. So, okay, I get why. If you don't know me, you might be reluctant, but I just felt and the reason why I even agreed to do this podcast and why I didn't, jump down your neck when you asked me to be on and then you canceled, it was because I'm like, you got put between a rock and a hard place. And I think that's really corny for your homie to not be the one to reach out and say, look, I know Bueno reached out to you, but we as a collective, kind of whatever. Cause it's like, it's not an outvote at that point. It's literally say over yours is what it kind of became. So I was like, look, man, if that's the case, and it's interesting too, that the reason why you want to deviate from the Winnipeg's finest thing is because it was a little too safe. I would have said it boxes you in a little too much with having Winnipeg in the title of it. Right.
Yeah.
Because kind of pigeonholes you where like you're recycling guests after a while. Anyone who has like any of the fact that you had to reach out to me, who's in Toronto, hardly doing shit with himself, and you're like, well, he's kind of from Winnipeg. He talked about breasts. Pull up. I felt that was limiting to you, and to be completely fair, and again, I don't know this guy from a hole in the wall. He really wasn't the value of whatever brand that you guys were building. And that's not necessarily any shade to him. I'm sure he's probably, great at whatever the fuck else he wants.
Yeah, no, it's not a personal attack.
But in terms of just me as somebody who's, consuming this content or whatever, I'm like, okay, Bueno clearly is the talent in this duo. And this guy is just there to be like, yeah. Oh, there's some titties. And like, I don't know. So for me, I was just disappointed that I'm like, cause I was I was ready to, at that time, there was a lot of things that I was trying to get off my chest. A lot of that shit is kind of like whatever to me now. And I was like, all right, Kate, bless, whatever it is, what it is. I'll just use it on my platform. Not that serious. But I'm like, it's kind of unfortunate just because, I don't know that fucking guy. So for me to feel like I got kind of, nixed by some dude who could just hide behind his fucking computer, kind of whack. And here's my thing. I keep the same energy. If anybody who knows me, I don't mince my words. It's not because he's not here that I'm saying this. I was really hoping that I could go on there and challenge him just in general on some other shit that I kind of spectated on. But if I bump into him in Winnipeg, it's not going to be like some, hostile energy, but I'll flat out tell him, be like, yo, bro, that was a whack move. Like,
no, for sure. And there was another instance where, he almost nixed an episode. And I think the reasoning for it was really, and I kind of like told the person and he's like, let me talk to him. And I was like, okay, cool. And I don't think that you're out of line at all. I agree with you completely, honestly. And that was one of the things that when we got into it, I said, if we don't agree on a guest 100%, we won't do it. That was what we agreed to 2 years ago when we started it. And I was like, that's what we're going to keep because I keep my word in terms of that. It was frustrating for me to have to go back and tell you. And I felt bad for it. And I think you recognize that. So thank you for recognizing that and kind of not giving me too much shit because I do deserve shit. I should have told him like, no, man, if this is your call, you're as much a part of the team as I am. You should just fucking talk to him. And I didn't. I was like, all right, I guess I'll do it, which is a soft move on my part.
I mean, it is what it is. Like, I get it. And that's why, like, I'm it's not a big deal. Like, I'm bringing it just because, again, I'm going to bring it up just because it was something that happened. And it's like, we only have some interactions. That was a pretty prominent interaction. So, but yeah, anyway, so the question I asked you was, talking about Winnipeg and, you know, I'm repping Winnipeg here. So I know I might sound like I hate a lot of Winnipeg, but if I do genuinely see talent, and I've been very outspoken in supporting artists that I believe have a legitimate chance and opportunity to cross over, I will support them. So YSN Fab, for example, I don't know this person from a hole in the wall, by the way. I've only ever just, you know, taken in some of the content that's been shared to me and so on and so forth. And I really fuck with the music. He released merch. I bought everything that he had, the hoodies, the long sleeves, the hats, the toques, all that shit, because I'm like, I want to support artists from this city. Now, my question to you is, who do you feel like, and it doesn't need to be music, it doesn't need to be, you know, an entertainer. Who do you feel like in the Winnipeg sphere that the city is, you know, all symbiotically in unison supporting this individual?
There's one name that came up, and you'd agree with this, Dancing Gabe, but it's not like he's trying to build a brand. He's just he's a public figure that goes to sports games, right? I couldn't tell you if there was like somebody like yourself or me or YSN Fab or Miazwe or Julian Rowan who, I don't know why people just like hate on for the fucking sake of hate. I do know why, because he's a white comedian. But people just fucking losing their mind at him. I couldn't tell you if there's anyone like that who people wholeheartedly throw their arms around. And it's not to say if you don't have 100% support, it's whack and people are hating on you. But one of the reasons why I left Winnipeg, and one of the reasons why I'm so glad to go back to Toronto, is the culture in the city is kind of like, no, you can't leave the flock. No, stay here with us. No, don't leave. No, fuck you. You think you're better than us. And then if you make it, like the Guess Who, this is a story I was told by somebody much older than me. They're 70 now. They said the Guess Who left Winnipeg because they couldn't handle the people fucking giving them shit. And then they got famous and everybody's like, American Woman!
Bro, okay, so the reason why, I mean, using the whole crab in a bucket analogy is kind of played out, but what is interesting, and just to use it as a very fundamental explanation as to why you need to leave Winnipeg, right? Mm-hmm. And here's the thing, I treat Winnipeg very much like a sibling, right? I'll fucking say the most egregious things about them, but the minute somebody else who's not from says anything about them, I quickly jump down their neck. So I love Winnipeg for what it made me into, for the things it taught me, for the, you know, just some of the great people that I still have in my life to this day. My only issue with the mentality of kind of like skewering artists or trying to say that they are disloyal for leaving. Mm-hmm. Looking at the structure, Winnipeg doesn't have an infrastructure to support any of those arts independently. Mm-hmm. If I am a rapper, right? Winnipeg has what, 900,000 people in it?
Not even.
Something like that? 800,000. Yeah. If I am a rapper, let's look at the funnel, right? So this is how many people are in Winnipeg. Now, this many people are within this age demographic that might actually consume hip hop. Then this many people are ones who actually do listen to hip hop. This many consume it, this many purchase, this many, so on and so forth. Mm-hmm. So it becomes such a small pocket of people that are actually going to come out for events. If you can get more than 500 people in Winnipeg for a hip hop show, that is insane.
Yeah.
But you can't sustain an entire career off of just that. No. So you have to be able to leave in order to spread your wings. And like the people that I stay in touch with who've crossed over, like you probably know me and Takis have had a strong relationship since he was 15 years old, since he was throwing hip hop shows and
I love that guy.
Shit like that, right? So, but again, like he'll be the first to tell you that it's like, yeah, it's cool and it's fun to DJ in Winnipeg while you're there, but it becomes this thing where like there's only so many clubs, there's only so many venues, there's only so many events that you can all, you know, split the pot in terms of everyone has a fucking controller and wants to be a DJ. So there's only so many gigs. So then it starts to be this toxic thing where people are hating on you because you're taking this other person's food and you're the new it guy. So then people want to start flaming and skewering you, right? And there aren't enough people to collaborate within that city for you to really be able to have a strong, solid body of work to be able to cross over to that next thing. Yeah. So when I see guys like Lavish, who, you know, did what they could do within Winnipeg. They go to Toronto, and now he's in LA, and he's finding the right people. And you know, people from Winnipeg want to hate because, oh, this guy left the city. Well, what did you expect him to do?
Yeah.
You aren't enough to support this person independently.
Yeah.
They have to be able to cross over to see any smidgen of success. And it's the same thing with every facet of entertainment, whether it be comedy or so on and so forth. At least Winnipeg has the Winnipeg Comedy Festival. But again, if that's the only thing you're looking out for, it's like you're shooting yourself in the foot. You got to go to Montreal. You got to go to Vancouver. You got to go and travel the States. Like, you have to be able to leave in order to be able to come back and rep it. The same way Drake, people were hating on him at first in Toronto because they were like, oh, fuck this guy. Like, he's from Degrassi and he looks corny. He doesn't look like your typical rapper. He's singing. Toronto hated him, but it was him being able to cross over, go to the States, link up with Lil Wayne, find a base in Houston, go on tour, and then be able to bring it back, where now he just announced last week that he has his own event center in Toronto. But again, those aren't things that can happen if you consistently just stay. If he only stayed in Toronto, if he, let's say, for whatever reason, had a criminal record and he couldn't cross the border, he would never have become as big of an artist. As talented as he is, he wouldn't have had the collaborations, he wouldn't have had the looks on tour, he wouldn't have been able to, you know, just amass all of the respect overseas and across the border to be able to bring it back here and have the OVO Fest for almost 10 years running and so on and so forth, right? So I just find that whole argument of like, oh, you have to stay here or else you're not loyal is fucking insane. Like, because for me, like, again, it's one of those things, like, wouldn't you want to see me on a TV network in the US shouting out Winnipeg? Isn't that a better look than just being in Winnipeg and telling Winnipeggers how dope Winnipeg is? Like, that shit is nuts to me. So
yeah, I think it's funny that, and again, like, I'm ready to fight people when they bring this up, but I was bringing it up because to me it's funny. The NHL had a poll I think like a year or two ago, about their least favorite city to travel to, and Winnipeg was the winner by far. Like, it was the very clear winner. So I use that because it's funny. Like, people are like, Winnipeg's a shithole. I'm like, yo, shut the fuck up.
Well, actually, National Geographic in 2016, 2017, I don't know why I remember these pointless things, but they actually had in their magazine of top 10 places in the world to visit in the summer, and Winnipeg was on that list of all the places, because the Forks, baby, you know.
The Forks are dope.
You get mini donuts and you get people screaming at you for no reason, but, you know, that's love of what,
you know what, as a comedian, I know you're buddies with him, and I'm very grateful to Mike Green for running the show that he does. And I know people are like, oh, either Mike Green's cool or you hate his guts. I think Mike's done a great job of like putting talent on and requiring people to do the work and not just putting you on for the sake of putting you on. You know, I've had some people be like, oh man, that guy's such an asshole, he told me this and this. I'm like, well, how are your sets doing? And they're like, oh, well, they're doing great. And I'd see them, it's like, they're not doing great. It's like, is he an asshole? Which he might be. Like, Mike knows how he comes off. Or is he telling you his honest assessment?
Look, Mike Green, and this is very biased because I stand for Mike Green. I'm definitely, if not his number one fan, I'm in the top tier. So Mike Green is one of those guys where I will, whether he wants to or not, I will forever be that guy's friend. And
whether he wants to.
outside of comedy, like, we like to go hit the gym together. We can always go grab a fucking Banh Mi Boys or some shit like that together and just kind of like laugh. And he introduces me to weird beans and shit like that, right? So, but in terms of in the realm of comedy, I was there the first night that he ever did, and it wasn't Handsome Daughter at the time. It was the Sherbrooke or whatever it was, right? I remember the first night that we went in there, he had his dad playing the fucking accordion and shit to intro the show. And if there's one thing about Mike Green and why I find it so funny when I pop into the city or whatever, and then he gives me stage time and shit like that, he knows there's something to be said about when you're genuinely a fan of comedy, you want to just put on the best show for not just so I can keep this place open and shit like that. No, because you want to see good comedy. A lot of times people are going to see comedians because they're looking for an escape from their own lives. They're just looking for something fun and cheap to do, like for date night or whatever. So there's nothing worse than going and seeing a bunch of shit comedians. And if you're the one hosting the room and you're putting people on just because they keep showing up or, you know, they keep asking to be on, that's fucked up for your brand and your show. The fact that he's able to do it for a decade goes to show that he knows what he's doing. So if people want to say, oh, this guy's an asshole, whatever, it's like, well, sometimes you have to be. Sometimes you have to be cutthroat in order to be able to sustain something so that everyone else can enjoy it. Otherwise, if you're simping, if you're pandering, you end up getting one of those shows and people stop showing up.
And Mike does a fantastic job running the group. So yeah, I think honestly, that's been part of my biggest growth as a comedian. Like I'll have talks to them from time to time, and it'd be like, I remember when I first started, I was like, yeah, do you want to talk? Like I like doing comedy, but I'm struggling. He's like, yeah, I know. I was like, okay, thanks. And we sat down and talked. He's like, Bueno, you're terrible at comedy. I was like, I know. Like that's why we're doing this. And he's like, oh, okay, this is gonna go pretty well then. I was like, oh, okay.
Oh, trust me. I remember like, so before he had opened up that room, the Cavern was like the go-to spot on Sundays to do stand, right? And shout out to John B. Duff, rest in peace. But he was like the curmudgeon-y old uncle of comedy in the scene. And it took a lot for him to warm up to people, right? And I'll never forget, there was one set that I did. I think it was about like having food poisoning from taquitos or some shit like that, right? And I was just kind of like just spewing some random shit on stage, and I got a huge pop. And then at the end of the night, Mike Green, like very much to his own dismay, was like, well, we do this thing at my place afterwards. If you want to come by, you know, it is what it is. Just smoke some weed, you know, play some pool. It's not that serious. And if you want to come, it's up to you if you want to come. So then I was like, yeah, sure, I'd love to, because this was like my first invite into the comedy scene. So I was like, oh, dope. This, you know, let me see what's going on here. And, you know, I'm me trying to be cool. Like I was probably younger than you are, just like trying to roll a joint. And I was like lighting it from the fucking filter side and shit like that. And I'll never forget, I was in Mike Green's basement, and it was him and John B. Duff. And they were like, which comedians do you look up to? And then I kind of like just went down this roll call list. So like, your shit is nothing like that. Your shit sucks. And I was like, okay. They're like, I'm not saying that you should copy those guys, but you should probably find out why you like them and start writing your material. And I was like, huh. So, you know, I owe a lot of credit to both those guys for just kind of, again, that tough love, because they're not saying it because they're like, I'm trying to discourage you from ever hitting the stage again. Or even if I discourage you, that means that you weren't really built for that shit in the first place. But like, again, nothing but love for Mike Green. And as much as he says that he's the #1 host, and I'm not talking about comedy, I'm talking about like just hosting people at his crib and shit like that, I might have the leg up on him. You know, I always have a good time. He's got stripper stories, you know, courtesy of moi. So listen, yeah, shout out to Mike Green. Shout out to the whole Winnipeg comedy scene, man. There's a lot of guys who I really feel like if they crossed over, they would definitely be able to put Winnipeg in a proper light, and they would rep Winnipeg properly. Like Paul Rablowskis was like,
Paul's amazing.
That guy's a fucking monster.
Paul's amazing.
Contrary to what people may believe, I did beat him in Funniest Person with a Day Job. Even though I didn't win, I knocked him out of my round respectfully. So just know I got that body on you, Paul. Love you.
Well, yeah, I think, and you kind of, actually, when I did Funniest Person with a Day Job, my mentality was like, I know I'm new and I'm not that funny, but if I can sell a bunch of tickets, that'll give me a shot. And so I sold like almost 200 tickets. Oh, I was like, what's better? Like, what are they going to be like? Okay, the kid's not funny, but he put people in the seats. Like,
oh, for sure. And they'll put you through for that kind of shit. Like the first year I did Funniest Person with a Day Job, to be honest, that footage is actually on YouTube, and you'll see, like, considering I had been doing comedy maybe for 6 months at that point, and this is again like 10 years ago, I fucking crushed. I deserved to go through to that next round. So it's obviously I had an entire table that was just people cheering me on, but like objectively you can see that like the majority of the room from the other side, not counting my friends, was really vibing with the shit. So like I don't feel like the competitions are a good judge, because like you could be on one night and just, you know, have a shit night the other night or whatever, like and some people will bring in their same jokes knowing that it's a different crowd the next night, and they end up advancing, and like who are the judges really and shit like that. So yeah, I mean that's why I don't feel like comedy should be judged in that way, but at the same time it's still a great way to just kind of either get your name out, or even at the very least putting on a cool show for your friends, right? Because everyone's bringing there, so you're almost guaranteeing a packed room, and you just get to get your shit off. So if you're a new comic, like I definitely think that's a great platform to at least kind of get your feet wet. But it could also, could gas you up too. I've seen some people where they go there, they bring all their friends, they're all just laughing, pandering, because like, again, it's the first time they've ever seen them do comedy. This is the first time they may have ever done comedy, and they're like, I'm a comedian now, and then they start fucking running around the town saying, I'm working on my special, and it's like, okay, it's not necessarily how things work, but I wish you the best.
Yeah, I mean, last year when Rumors reopened again during the quarantine, and this is like I was barely a year and a half into comedy, so again, it's not like I'm some comedy vet, like I'm still very, very new. And given quarantine time, how much stage time people have lost, it's like, yeah, you tear your ACL, you still got to rehab, right? You can't just be like, yeah, I'm going to go back and average 20. But the first time I opened for Kathleen McGee, and it was like half capacity, and I was like, I need to sell this building out so that they'll have a good like memory of me to allow me to get spots later. And I think I got like 3 or 4 spots after that, because I was talking to Tyler, and he's like, look, you're new, you're young. You got some talent, but like there's clearly things you need to work on. But if you're going to put people in the seats, yeah, I have no issues putting you on.
For sure. It's a business at the end of the day, right?
Yeah,
so
exactly.
And if you're bringing those people, then they're more likely to laugh. So you're set, even though it may not be as polished as you'd want it to be. People are
exactly.
saying, just because, it is what it is. But like, shout out to Tyler, because that guy has a very difficult job, because how many bodies come in and out of the Winnipeg circuit, and it's very difficult to discern who's good, who's not, because he may not be attending the open mics and shit like that, because he's got to run that room fucking 7 a week and book talent from across and so on and so forth. But I mean, the one thing that I'll give him his flowers for sure is that I remember there was a time where, like, my parents are old, right? My dad will be 80 years old this year. My mom will be just turned 68 this year.
Damn.
For them, it's like, my mom, she's always supported me in comedy, no matter how fucking like nasty my material was.
That sounds nice.
But she would always say, like, oh, if you got to swear to be funny, you're not funny. Like, look at like Robin Williams and so on and so forth. And I'm like, okay, whatever. So my goal was always to just be able to do a clean set for her. So I've always been that person who's kind of been in and out of the comedy scene, where like I always get distracted with something else. And then I always, so for me, I always consider myself brand new. Whenever I start hitting the stage again, when I start cycling back into comedy again, I'm like, okay, I'm brand new again. Like, I'm I'm expecting shit. I got to work from square one. So when I hit up Tyler, I just sent an email to the Rumors email, and he's like, yeah, he's like, so these guys vouch for you. You've been doing comedy for, like at this point, it was probably like 8 years or whatever. It's like, yeah, you can open for this comic or whatever. So I was like, dope. So I literally went there, did my clean set. It was decent. And he was like, yeah, anytime you want a guest spot, just let me know, kind of thing or whatever. Right. So it's just dope that, like, as much as I kind of like, we'll go to different places. Like, I spent a lot of time in, Kelowna last year and part of the year before, and obviously my time in Toronto. Winnipeg always is quick to just kind of give me a look if I ask for it. So again, nothing but love for the city. There's just a lot of fucking mouth breathers that are just floating around, and that shit is disheartening.
Oh yeah, big time. And I'm sure that when I first moved out to Toronto, I'm not sure if you knew, there was mics going on in Oshawa, and doing that was like,
yeah, I kind of saw you hitting some of those obscure out of pocket Oshawa in the cut, and I'll give you credit for that, because I mean, it takes a lot for you to have the will to just go there, just knowing that you're just going to do like 5, and it may not hit, and there may not be a crowd, and whatever. Yeah. So just have the gusto to do that. You're a stronger man than I.
Thank you. I was actually very fortunate. I think I did like 6 or 7 sets out there, but like 3 or 4 of them really hit. And a lot of the guys were like, wow, like those. And I was like, thank God I was able to like leave a good lasting impression on these people. It's not like, oh, I made it and I'm now an official Toronto comedian, but like just being able to leave good impressions with people, right? Like with Tyler, you're able to sell tickets. I'll give you a look. Being able to go out to those mics. They're like, oh, where do you live? Downtown Toronto. They're like, how'd you get here? I took the train. How are you getting back? I'm taking the train. And they're like, what's wrong with you? And I'm like, hey man, this is what I came here for, right? Like I'm gonna move to Toronto for comedy. Doesn't go do comedy when it's available. I remember when I was some people were asking, the like no shade, no tea, no shade. But some people were telling me like, oh man, I wish Rumors would give me a spot. And a lot of people were like, oh, it's difficult to get into Rumors. Oh, well, Rumors is tough. They don't give people spots. And I was like, okay, let me test this. So I went up to Tyler after show. I was like, hey Tyler, my name is Nicolas Bueno. I've been doing comedy in the city for like 1.5 years, not even. But I was wondering what you look for in comedians who you put up. And I was wondering, what kind of traits you think work well in comedians. And he was like talking to me for a bit. It wasn't like a super long conversation, but it was enough to be like, he was like, hey, how often do you do comedy in the city. I was like, I go every opportunity I can. He's like, okay. Would you be down? He's like, give me your info, email me. I'll let you know I can get you up. I was like, okay. And I found out that like, I don't know why this is looked down upon. And maybe this is a narrative about the macro that I'm making here, but especially in comedy, people are afraid to ask or share their shit or put themselves out there or ask people. Like when I put out my Bueno Report videos, I'll ask some of my friends, I'll be like, hey, can you share this? It'd be really helpful to me. And they go, yeah, of course. And some people go, no. Some people screen me. So what? You have to do that. Like, I don't understand why people are like, I'm afraid to ask.
I'll say no, because I'm like, nah, nigga. I'm like, I haven't seen your Bueno Report yet, so I don't know if that shit hits. And you never shared my shit. So I'm like, the audacity of you to be like, hey, do you want to share my shit? I'm like, nah, nigga, you see my—
That's not true. I shared the breast video. That one was awesome.
But no, you make a valid point. And I think it's because comedians are innately just insecure beings to begin with. For you to seek validation from complete strangers, to be like, I came up with this idea, laugh, please. Like there's a certain level of insecurity that's there already. So for you to also feel like, well, now that I've made some of these people laugh, how do I ask people to help me do this more often or whatever? But again, I'll give you the credit again, as much as I will probably not share your video, not because I like it, just because again, I don't like flooding my shit with just other people's stuff or whatever, because it's hard enough to just get my own shit out there.
Dude, it's your platform. Do what you want with it.
But what I will say is that, yeah, you take the initiative to reach out to people. You take the leap of moving out of your city, which is never comfortable, especially during a pandemic. You will ask those hard questions. You will start a podcast. You know, you're clearly an intelligent guy, the way you present yourself, and you're very mindful of other people's shit. I would just say, don't care what people say. Like, you got to stand on something, right? So when I hear sometimes, like, I remember there was a moment you had where there's this controversial thing where somebody felt a way about your video, and they did like this whole deep dive, like a 5-hour video about your video or whatever.
Yeah.
I just felt like, look, stand on your 10, bro. Like, just say like, yeah, I said what I said, and that's it. Thanks for making the content. Peace out. Not being like, yeah, I understand where they come from. Like, why pander? You said what you said at the time because you represented what you represented, right? So like, it's for me, and this is again just me, like, and my opinion means literally nothing to anyone, but I like to just give it because you've given me an opportunity to plug in my microphone today.
Literally.
So my thing is just like, look, if you say something, stand on it. And obviously there's a statute of limitations. Like if it's something that you said 10 years ago on Twitter, like Kevin Hart saying that he wants to fucking beat his kid with a fucking dollhouse because he wants to wear dresses or something like that. Yeah, don't stand on that because it's not, you've evolved from that person. But if somebody's hating on some shit you said last week, let them sit on that. Let them fucking spin themselves into their dizzy, because you engaging with that is only fueling it to continue to happen. And I feel like it's like
where I was coming from with that, and this is something I've clearly grown from, because I made a tweet about, I'm not sure if you know what's happened about Thinkster, and
we'll talk about Thinkster. I got my opinions about Thinkster.
So I remember when that person made that thing, I told my co-host, I was like, we need to get people's eyes on this. I need to engage with this person that doesn't come off as defensive, because it will boost the hell out of the video. Honestly, like, they're like, I listened to the podcast, then I listened again. And then they made a 5-hour video of them listening. They listened to it 3 times. I'm like, yeah, they can say whatever the hell they want. I don't care. Like, I was like, yo, we should have that person on the podcast. And my co-host was like, no, hell no, not down at all. I'm like, bro, that would be insane.
So that would be top tier content. I'm here for that shit. And I love messy shit. Like, and I think everyone loves messy shit. And that's the thing you need to acknowledge. It's like, as much as you want the messy shit to stop, look, if it's not physically harming someone and you're not badgering somebody to the point where you're trying to get them the fuck out of here, be a little bit messy. It's fun. It's entertaining. Like, if I get my name splashed in the mud sometimes, I'm like, yo, if some people got some chuckles off this or it made their day, I'm like, yo, use me as the fucking target by all means. Because at the end of the day, I go home, I fucking, I'm privileged to be able to make love to a beautiful woman, and I'm able to make myself a nice little steak on the cast iron. I'm blessed. So like, for me, it's like, yo, if that's what you need, by all means, use me as that fucking vessel. But Thinkster, let's talk about it. Let's think about Thinkster. Let's see what's going on here. So what are your views? First of all, for anyone who doesn't know, explain to people what the fuck Thinkster is.
So Thinkster is an app that my friend Julian Rowan helped create with these 2 guys. It was meant to be, and they reached out to me about it because they were trying to get me on the app. Because last summer during the pandemic, when it first started, I was like, I'm going to post a poll every day on my story just for fun. And some of the polls were things like, is macaroni salad pasta or a salad? Like stupid, like trying to be funny, quirky shit like that. And some of it was like, should we cancel Canada Day, which I also think is a horrific idea. I don't think that's a good idea.
I just saw a post that actually just now where they were like, yeah, it's gaining traction. People are trying to get the fuck, like, Canada Day the fuck out of here. I'm like, when is it going to end? I mean,
yeah, wait, please.
Take my statutory holiday, and then I got a problem. I'm protesting against this.
Exactly. Anytime you lead a movement with "we need to cancel," I'm out. If you're like, we need to shift the focus of what Canada means as a country and what we want to move forward as, yeah, because now we're operating from a place of unity. You want to cancel something? That's a polarizing statement. Anyways, besides that.
Back to Thinkster.
Stay posted for the July Bueno Report on that. But anyways, so with Thinkster, they wanted to, because they were like, oh, you're doing all these polls. We're creating an app called Thinkster where you can ask polls, questions, make rankings about anything. You know, what's your favorite Drake album? You know, who do you think the best Raptors center in the last 10 years is? Gasol and Valanciunas, by the way, and Ibaka. But anyways, and all these other things about, you know, sports, personality. People could even use it for dating. You could see your compatibility with people's answers. You can see what they answer. You can also write opinions under the poll. You can add third options. The big thing about Instagram polls is it only has two options. You only see the scores. You don't see what people say. You don't see what people vote. So we're adding an option where you can comment. You're adding an option where you can make a third option. You can put a right answer or a wrong answer, which is the Instagram quiz option, but it needs a right answer, wrong answer, which is annoying. And so, like, we're trying to, when we do the beta testing, will you be on it, please? Can you ask some questions? I remember even in my work checklist, when the beta came out, I had at the last thing, write a fucking Thinkster question to help them get volumes of questions out there. And a lot of people threw support behind the idea because it's a sick idea. They're like, we're trying to further discussion. We're trying to make a place that's fun, where you can ask fun questions and see what people are into, create discussion. And we're also trying to create an environment where discourse can happen. And when you're doing something like that on such a grand scale, you're trying to cover so many topics, of course there are going to be bugs. You're launching an app. There are going to be instances where maybe you fuck up, maybe you do things you weren't as proud of, or maybe you do some things that it's like, okay, I could have done that better. The app was released, officially launched last week. And the support on Instagram was amazing. It was insane. And then I looked on Twitter, and there was a small group of people like, wow, Julian Rowan's trying to launch an app. What a fucking loser. And there are a lot of people who just hate Julian Rowan, and he's a privileged white male, and he opened for Louis C.K. And it's like, man, get off his dick. Like, if this is the most fun you have all day is bashing a guy, I don't know what to tell you. Like, please get a hobby, enjoy life more.
Those types of arguments, like he opened for Louis C.K., is, well, one, this was before Louis scandal. That's first things first.
Second, no, it was after.
Well, even better, because look, and I'll say it here right now. I spent the $8 to watch Louis' special on the website. I spent that, and I watched that, and I sent the link to somebody so they could watch it too. My thing is this, right? If you're going to cancel Julian for that, are you also going to cancel the venue? Are you going to cancel the people who paid hard tickets? Because I guarantee you that show was fucking packed. So
sold out immediately.
For sure. So I'm like, it's just convenient to me that, like, you guys put him to the point where he's a recognizable name, and now you're so quick to try to cut him down. It's that same fucking cycle. And that's why I'm like, I tell anybody who's from Winnipeg who starts to bubble up, I'm like, take this as your opportunity to get the fuck out right now before the hate starts to discourage you to the point where you just no longer want to feel passionate about your craft. Because again, like, Julian, for kind of teaming up with these guys to make this app a thing. Again, if you only keep it within Winnipeg, you're going to keep getting that cycle where the negative news is going to outweigh any type of crossover. I would have almost, if I were them, I would have tested it out in the beta phases in different markets. I would have literally paid market researchers to be like, yo, let's get Montreal, let's get Vancouver, let's get Toronto, whatever, because they don't have those pockets on Twitter of hate.
I don't know if they did that though, because they had over 1,000 users on the beta. I'm not sure if it was just Winnipeg, or I'm not sure if it was other things. Because there were some things that I thought based on the hate online, but I talked to them about it later. They're like, no, that was never a thing. Right? So I'm not sure if they had other people testing it or not.
See, that's what I'm thinking. So it's like, because they reached out to me and I was like, I've got an Android. So I was still able to kind of use it a bit on the Android thing, but like, it was very, very infantile at that point. So it kept crashing. So I haven't fully been able to experience it or whatever. But again, like I'm very much for people just trying to shoot their shot in whatever capacity, whatever field. Right. So if you have an idea and you want to run with it, I'm giving you the cred just for that.
Yes.
However, and with that being said, I'm being very mindful of the fact that, because I don't know if you're aware of how much I strongly detest a lot, as much as I've been praising a lot of specific artists. Winnipeg rappers, that shit is a disease, respectfully. That shit is a motherfucking disease. Somebody needs to tell these gentlemen that it's like, yo, you've been at this shit for 10 years. The shit ain't slapping. Nobody listens to your shit. Your octaves haven't changed. You haven't progressed as an artist. It's time to fucking hang it up. Costco needs free samples handed out. And that's where I lie with that. But if you're trying a new app, it's probably best that you don't solely rely on the market that you're in, because one, your data, you almost already know what you're going to expect from the data, but also it invites that opportunity for just pure hate. Because if people from Winnipeg think that it's an app that isn't from Winnipeg, they'll probably be more prone to migrating towards it, just being like, oh, it's whatever. And then later on you can be like, ha, got you. You know, that app you said you loved, it was all me. But I think to just release it and keep it within the confines of Winnipeg is a bit of a challenging thing, just because we know historically Winnipeggers love to hate on their own. So
a city full of haters. I think it's the cold and the fact that we're the only major city for however long. Like, I don't count those weird Mennonite towns outside in Manitoba. I don't count those. It's like in Ontario, if I go outside of Toronto, I'll find Ajax, I'll find Pickering, I'll find all these little communities that are actual, like, could be cities. And you're in the metropolitan area, you know, there's cities everywhere. I'm fucking up my words, but you know what I mean. In Winnipeg, you leave Winnipeg,
unless you're Goody Grace. Shout out to Goody Grace. With Steinbach, Manitoba, yo, he's repping for the town. He's repping, it's Selkirk, Manitoba. It's one of the S's, on the outskirts.
See, we don't even know. But anyway, so the hate started to grow. And it went from, wow, Julian's a loser trying to create an app. What a fucking idiot. What a loser. And then it went from, wow, he's fostering bigotry and hate. And they were like they were cherry picking some of the questions and his opinions of the questions. And oh no, it wasn't cherry pick, motherfucker. Most of the questions, the overwhelming majority of the questions are not political. It's questions about, like I said, Drake album, sports, personality, what things you look for in dating, so many things. And people took the political because they asked some questions like, are there two genders? And like, is drunk consent still consent? Or what was another one that got shit on? One of the guys asked if...
By that reaction, though. Are you surprised? Are you surprised that people went out of their way to cherry pick the political stuff? Are you genuinely surprised?
No, not at all.
Again, it just goes back to the same thing. Like, if you're doing something in Winnipeg and you're saying it's by Winnipeg, guess who's going to hate on it? You guessed it. Like, it's unfortunate, but look, I really hope this doesn't discourage him. I know people were trying to like weaponize his mental health and saying, oh, if rather than, going to see a therapist, I'm going to create an app or whatever. And I'm just like, you guys realize that if this person is genuinely suffering from mental health, that these types of comments are not constructive. Because it's interesting to me that, like, and God forbid, let's hope obviously none of this ever happens, but if he was to, let's say, take his own life,
mm-hmm.
those same people that are over here jumping down his neck, whatever, being like, oh, it's too soon. And like, he wasn't that bad of a guy. And like, oh, I remember this one time he retweeted me. Like, people are so fucking phony. So like,
mm-hmm.
you can't buy into what they're saying at that moment, because like, these people are fickle, especially if you have the time on Twitter to just fucking talk shit about what somebody else is doing. Means you really have nothing else going on.
Yeah. And you know what? I think this is where I was going to bring it back to. I think there's been growth. I tweeted, Miazwe, he tweeted, Winnipeg's got the biggest haters ever. And I quote tweeted, I was like, facts. And then somebody was like, so Julian isn't race. And I was just like, I'm not even going to respond. I don't care. And then I tweeted a bunch of tweets about like, if you actually don't like the app, that's fine. Like, just because it came out doesn't mean you have to love it. Like, that's stupid. I remember Mike told me, actually, he's like, I don't want people to support me. I want people to enjoy me. If my shit's whack, don't support it.
Facts.
Tell me if it's whack so I can get better or choose something new if I'm really that bad. So I was like, yeah, so don't support the app, enjoy the app. And I love that Mike Green said it, of course. Gives that, you and I come from immigrant families, so like we get that tough love, you know what I mean?
For sure. And I think too that the point that I keep bringing back to these local rappers, that I think the reason why a lot of these guys keep going is because they're surrounding themselves with yes men, and people are just like, yeah, you're doing something, and it's kind of cool and whatever else. But it's like, if you really are a fan of this person or a friend to this person, you got to tell them, yo, that last record you put out was god awful. That music video looks corny as hell. This, like, whatever it is that you're doing right now is like, people think that I'm a hater when I say that, like, some of these rappers should just stop. But with rap, it's different than comedy, right? Because somebody could say the exact same thing to me and being like, bro, you've been doing this shit for so fucking long and your shit ain't really working out or whatever else. But for me, it's like, I'm not doing it for, oh, I need to get to this certain point and shit. And I do a lot of stuff behind the scenes in terms of writing, and I'm starting to get in my executive production bag and shit like that. So like a lot of the things that I may be working on behind the scenes, I don't need to be on the forefront for those things. But when I see somebody who's putting everything on the line for a rap career, we know that rap is a young man's game. So if you've been doing it for a certain amount of time and you haven't been able to progress and you haven't been able to transcend, somebody has to be in your corner to say, yo, dog, what's your contingency plan? What's your backup? Because right now it ain't looking very promising. And these guys really try to bank their shit on, and I think they have an unrealistic expectation for what it is to cross over and to make it. You know how many guys there are who get record deals that are have a massive record that maybe took off on TikTok or whatever, or a viral moment or whatever it is, and they're still the label is still trying to recoup the advance that they gave them. They're not able to tour because of the pandemic, so they're hurting, stuff like that. So what makes you think that you, being in this very small bubble, that you're going to be the one that I'll put it this way, if a Winnipeg artist right now today was to have a hit record, how are they going to manage that? How are they going to be able to, within the confines of Winnipeg, be able to have a fruitful career if they're still within the confines of Winnipeg? There's no legitimate studios, no shade to the studios that are out there, but I'm talking like proper engineering, proper mixing. There's none of that I'm seeing in Winnipeg. You don't have the infrastructure to really make a sonically great song. The video production, people always want to cut corners and spend a lot of money on, the booze and the chain.
You're wrong. Strangers Media Co. Follow at Strangers Media Co.
And that's the thing. There are some dope.
I had to plug. Sorry.
For sure. No, and listen, they're dope. There's a few other guys, like I know Sky Spence with the Nasty joint or whatever, all that kind of stuff. Like there are some dope creatives in Winnipeg. If anything, Winnipeg has historically been a very creative city. What I'm saying is that they're not investing their money in the right things. Rather than spending your money on putting out a mediocre video that is attached to a mediocre record, spend more money on mixing and mastering your song. Invest all of your money into features. If you look at somebody who's made it, you're going to see that they probably didn't do it on their own. So if I'm YSN Fab right now, I'm not really looking to say, okay, I'm going to try to, put out some more cool videos. I'm looking like, okay, I've just sold a bunch of merch. I need to use this money and get a big feature, because that'll get me a big look that I can cross over and do other markets. Because if that artist that I collaborated with is from New York, they get a lot of buzz in their city. I get my record going out there. That now gives me a new venue and new area that I can now go profit off of and get my name spread out. So they have to think more long-term rather than just like, oh, I did this one show and I'm going to show you a fucking behind the scenes video of this show, a documentary of this show, behind the scenes, follow up on the show, and like doing pod circuits. No shade to doing pod circuits, because we love pod circuits, but like just doing a lot of the shit that like, oh, we've made it already type of energy, when they could be spending that energy and their funding into the things that will actually get them over the hump.
Yeah, and comedy's got a much longer shelf life. Like think of how many comics, like the ones who are the biggest in the world right now. Chappelle, how old's Chappelle? Tom Segura, how old's Tom Segura? How old's Andrew Schultz? Like Andrew Schultz almost 40, and he's even like a young guy in the game, right?
That's what I was going to ask you, is like, could you even name a comedian right now who's in the mainstream that's under the age of 30?
How old is Mark Gagnon? But then again, he's boosted because
he's still on the come up, and he's associated to
Andrew Schultz, right?
So like, but again, like if we look at,
I'm gonna look up all of these. 1 sec. Keep going. Sorry, I don't want to.
Yeah, no, if we look at, comedians in general, like there's a few anomalies where in their 20s, they were able to kind of cross over. We're seeing it with Pete Davidson. Aziz was maybe in his mid 20s. And of course, Eddie Murphy earlier on was like in his early 20s, which is he's an outlier when it comes to comedy. But like most guys don't really start to even live life enough to be able to hold the weight of what it is to have made it in comedy until they're in their 30s and plus. So and it all depends, because comedy is multifaceted as well, right? It doesn't necessarily mean that you're just hitting a stage. Like you could be doing sketch comedy, you could be doing you could be writing for other comedians or shows and stuff like that. So there is way more of there's more opportunities within the realm of comedy, as opposed to if you're a rapper and you're in a small city, nobody wants you to write for them because you haven't made a hit for yourself yet.
Mm-hmm.
And if you get to a certain age, the people who come and consume, the young crowds that come to your shows, they're not going to keep coming to your shows because they're like, you haven't really proven yourself yet. So what are we still coming out for your shows at?
And Pete Davidson, he's 27. Sorry.
There you go. So yeah, that's what I mean. So Pete Davidson is definitely another one of those guys where it's like he's an anomaly as well, being so young, and obviously SNL helping him out as well. And again, but let's look again, and one of the biggest factors as well is proximity. When you're born and raised in New York, you're in proximity of great comedians and venues that can hone in your craft. Yeah. So there's a lot of different extenuating factors. Even when I say, like, Drake had to leave the city, he had a lot of extenuating factors too. Let's not forget that his mother is Jewish and the music industry is predominantly run by the Jewish community. His dad is from Houston, so he was able to have that dual citizenship and be able to bounce back and forth from Canada and the US. He was on a hit TV show in Canada, which was able to have him navigate the industry a little bit sooner, and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of, it was the perfect storm for a lot of the things that made him to where he's at now. Granted, him being an astronomical talent is what makes him the artist of the decade. But what I mean by being proximity is that it's very difficult for us to name people from Winnipeg who've crossed over. And it's even harder to name a rapper that's crossed over. So when I see like Winnipeg rappers who are just like, I don't know why it boils my blood so much. I think maybe because I was on streets 10 years ago and these guys would consistently send me their music and it was my job to look for music. So now when I'm no longer, I've kind of like decompressed myself from Canadian music and only really listen to the stuff that I want to listen to. When people still to this day send me Winnipeg artists' music and I'm like, bruh, my ears can no longer tolerate this. I like, this is not a thing for me anymore. I think that's why it bothers me so much, is that I'm like, these aren't bad people. They're just choosing a bad lane and they're just bad at it. And somebody needs in their corner needs to just tell them that. And it's not a bad thing to say, look, your shit is trash. When somebody, a comedian that I respect, comes up to me and says, bro, your shit's trash, I'm like, all right, cool. I'll take it with a grain of salt, either try to work harder or I'll stop. And that's really it. So if somebody in their corner was to be like, yo, bro, your shit, it's not hitting, it's not slapping, you look goofy in this video.
Yeah, of course. And I remember like my friends and stuff, even some like my friend and my family still tells me this, but like, your comedy sucks. And I'm like, oh, okay. But I kept doing it because I loved it. And then all my friends who told me I was shit were like, you actually gotten way better. Like, your shit's funny now. Like, you're not amazing, but there's growth. So I'm like, okay, thank God. Like, I'm on to something at least. We'll see where it takes me. But they talk about, and we'll go back to Thinkster in a sec, but I'll say this. Seth Godin talks about this in his book, The Dip. The biggest thing you need to learn when you're going on a certain journey or, pursuing something, know when to quit and know when to stick it through. So if you're in a cul-de-sac, if you're in a dead end, if you're in a situation where okay, what's the landscape really like? What am I doing? What's my potential? How could I really scale this? Get out. If it's a cul-de-sac, if it's a dead end, if it's not going to go anywhere. But if you're in the dip and you're like, okay, no, I actually feel like I can have a breakthrough. I feel like I can run this. I feel like I can get better at this. Then you need to stick out the down point.
Right. The problem is that a lot of people who are in that dip are surrounded by shovels telling them that, oh, we're almost there. We're almost there. This is going to be the thing. And it's like, sometimes you just need somebody to tell you, bro, that shit is trash. And if I have to be the grandfather of Winnipeg that comes around and tells all the young whippersnapper rappers that they're trash and people want to hate me for it, by all means. But look, if in 10 years, these people all blow up, I will easily eat my words. And guess what? It's a win-win for me, because at least you're putting on the city that I'm from. So look, I'm all for it. But I also don't want you to make a mockery of my city as well, which is why I go so hard for guys that I think are dope, because I'm like, this is a good representation of what our city has potential to be and to do. This person's doing the things the right way. They're putting out a lot of music that's higher quality. You could tell they spend money on their mixing and mastering. You could hear that they spend a lot of time just focusing on their craft. They don't have these lulls where they just stop putting stuff out because they're just kind of like writer's block or whatever. Like, those are the things that we need to uplift a little bit more and stop just pandering to people because they're our homies. We went to high school together. Like, oh, this guy's next. It's like, no, he's really not. He'll never be next. He's not even in the lineup. He's not even in the queue.
Yeah. So back to Thinkster. People are like, they're misogynistic, they're homophobic. And then it started escalating. People are like, I feel like Julian Rowan would call me a racial slur if he saw me in public. Some people are like, Julian Rowan should shut the fuck up. He's a privileged white male. This app was a decent idea, but they're too privileged and white to do it. So we're basing ability off skin color. Nice. We're basing awesome. That's a great message to teach people. Critical race theory for the win. And people were just going off. And then it turned into some of the influencers backed out. Some of the companies backed out. One of the influencers called them misogynistic and homophobic and racist, basically about how the questions were asked and that they knew better, and dropped out completely. And then they deleted their Twitter account, and people created fake accounts pretending to be people. Like, I think Julian said somebody pretended to be like Andy Noble or something and like asked these hateful questions. And people got on Twitter, they're like, we need to flood the app with hateful questions to show people how bad it is. It's like, if you really need to pine this hard, is it really that bad in the first place?
It never is, though. And that's the thing is, and that's why I never really take Twitter too seriously, is because until they get a two-step authentication verification or whatever, where you can actually, you have to use your phone number or your email address or something to validate that you are a real person, we're fighting against eggs. We're literally fighting against a bunch of people who are not even comfortable enough in their own skin to say it with their chest and use their own identity. They have to mask it through some sort of fucking miscellaneous anonymous bullshit. And it's like, I can't take that seriously, because even when I was getting canceled, there's somebody who came in with an egg account saying some really egregious shit about me, which I knew was cap. So I'm like, I never really fed into it, but I'm like, why wouldn't you, if this is such a thing, like such a dagger, why wouldn't you just say this shit with your chest from a real account? Everyone will support you because it's clearly bullshit. So like, I just find it so interesting that people are like, I can't take that to heart. I can't take it seriously. I literally, once I got canceled, I had a beautiful woman come and meet me in a hot tub in Kelowna, and I had a great view of the mountains, and I got my wood sucked, respectfully. I don't want to hear about like what your gripe is with me on Twitter, because it's like, that shit is not going to affect my day to day. I really hope, and I think my last tweet that day was, I hope like whoever has like a real issue with me, I hope that you go to sleep at night and meditate, because this isn't good energy for you. It really isn't bothering me. It really will not affect me, but it's not good for you. And I genuinely hope that you find whatever solace it is in, you know, once you put that fucking phone down, that you can actually decompress. Because what's interesting to see too is that I saw a lot of there was a lot of things happening at once, like between COVID, BLM, like protests here, doing there was so many things that were going on, the Me Too movement all at once. The people who were screaming the loudest ended up burning themselves out and being exhausted, to the point where it's like you're being a detriment to yourself by screaming so loudly about these things on an application where it's just a bunch of you guys. Mm-hmm. Like, you're not affecting change by doing this. And that's my only gripe with a lot of these people that, you know, chime in and have such strong opinions about stuff. It's like, well, what are you actually doing for your community? What are you actually doing for this cause? Because if you're not on the ground floor in the grassroots of it all, you're really just screaming to each other at that point. You can literally just put a bunch, it sounds like the Minions, like a bunch of these little fucking yellow people just like screaming at each other. And it's like, this does nothing positive for you or for whatever cause you're screaming about.
You know, it's funny. I actually, I had people like tweeting about me. I didn't even know, because I don't have the Twitter app. I don't have notifications on. Like in October of 2020, like, wow, this guy's such a cornball. I was like, I had no idea. Like, I only found out until somebody sent it to me like a couple of weeks ago. And this one guy said I'm the cringiest guy in Winnipeg. I was like, dude, my address isn't even in here. Like, that's impressive. If I am the cringiest guy, my address isn't there. Like, that's a win.
Well, you've forever been branded by Winnipeg. So regardless of where you could be in Dubai next week and they'll still be like, this Winnipeg hack.
Yeah, literally.
You're forever going to be a Winnipegger. So, I mean, it is what it is. I'll put it this way. I haven't lived in Winnipeg. I moved September 2013. So we're coming up on 8 years that I've even like lived there, where I've actually had a postal code there, and people still throw Winnipeg shit my way all the time and associate me heavily with Winnipeg. But it is what it is. Like I said, I have that same relationship as I do with siblings, where it's like, you know, I'll always say great things about it if somebody tries to shit on it. But I also got my experiences and things that I can say negatively about it as well.
Yeah, and the thing with Thinkster, I thought was so funny. I was starting, because I'm like, man, I'm like, if I just sit back and go, wow, people banging on Julian are losers, and I don't say something, like, the flood of hate isn't going to stop, because I know the silent majority either doesn't care or knows Julian and those guys did nothing wrong. Are there, or not nothing wrong, but those guys don't deserve the amount of hate they were getting. Were there things that they could have fixed with the app? Absolutely. And like, they literally talked to me about it. And they're like, yeah, we didn't realize this was going to be a big of a deal, so we changed it. Yeah, some of the questions we realized aren't yes or no, so we took them down, or we're going to ask them in a different way, or I'm not going to ask that anymore because I don't want this. But to like, so I started posting about it, and somebody was like, yeah, well, actually, they didn't ask any LGBTQ plus people. They didn't ask people of color. They didn't ask people from this demographic to be on the app. I was like, yeah, they did. They literally were. And the conversation's always devolved into this. I asked them this. I went, okay, let's say you're best friends. Let's say you're close friends with Julian. What do you do? And they always go, well, I'd talk to him and have his back. I go, okay.
So if I'm Julian Rowan in this situation, do you know what I do?
Double down.
No. I make a funny sketch because I'm a comedian, right? So what I would do is I would literally get 12 of my friends and me just walking down the street being like, wow, Thinkster just launched. And I'm walking down the street and then literally one person comes up and says, you're a hateful racist. And then somebody else comes and say, misogynistic, da da da. And then him just walking by, just like, and just scrolling his app and minding his own fucking business, just to show and illustrate that it's like, yo, I hear what you guys are saying, but it really doesn't affect my fucking day, and just keep it in motion. So, I mean, there's ways of reacting to it. I feel like if he ends up doing some fucking press release talking about the negativity, that's just only fueling them more. You just got to.
They did. I didn't think that was a good idea. Like, they did already release one.
No, like, and again, it's not my place. Like, again, it's not. I'm not in the same position, so I can't really say or speak on behalf of it. But like, at the end of the day, it's like, bro, come on, like, and there's also something to be said about just not looking, like, if you know it's going to be negative or people tell you it's negative, just avoid it. I'll put it this way. Last year, I did an interview with Chromaz, which is a very polarizing person in Toronto. She's essentially just known for just being Ratchet. And I did this through a Six Buzz. So I refused to read the comments. Mm-hmm. Because if you know anything about Six Buzz in their comments section, people get flamed up in there. So to protect my mental health, I went, reposted the video, and then never thought about it again. Because there's only so many people that will actually have the balls to come to you and say like, oh, you know, this was distasteful, or like, why would you amplify this person's voice or whatever. I think out of all of the people that reached out to me, there's maybe 2 people that had something even remotely negative to say. But I know if I went through those comments, I could have probably found 3,500 comments that were just slandering either me or her or whatever the case was. And it's like, why would I subject myself to that? Literally. So you have to also be able to discern that, like, you did something, you put it out there, you know it's not going to be well received by everyone. And as human beings, we are prone to looking and feeding into the negative shit way more than the positive, even if the positive substantially outweighs the negative. But we're always like, if for every 5,000 positive comments, if you get 2 negative ones, you're latching onto those, and those will fucking affect your day. So why subject yourself to that? Yeah,
I was telling Julian, I was like, dude, you're a comedian. You know this more than anybody else. You take the power by controlling the laughter. That's who owns the room, always. If there's no way to prove with money, and even then, if somebody's got money, but you can turn people on them with laughter, that's the ultimate equalizer. That's why everybody loves comedy. That is I was like, just own the narrative, control it by making people laugh.
And they're all hecklers. The difference is you have a microphone.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter how loud they think they are. It's like, bro, all you have to do is take your fucking mic and say, shut the fuck up. And then continue with what it is that you want to do. Because at the end of the day, it's like, if you stand on what you're saying and you have a funny way to convey it or whatever, it's like, bro, like, you'll always win. You'll always end up coming up on top if that's the way that you take it. But like, the minute you start to show the chink in your armor and whatever, people are going to keep fucking poking.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like,
exactly. You're right. And I think the biggest thing is, like, if people want to create fake accounts and try to fuck the app up, take care of that. Don't acknowledge it.
For sure.
Take care of it. Take the emails, send the cease and desist, track the IP address, do everything you got to do to protect yourself, do everything on the back end in order to make sure you're good. But publicly, and they posted their apology, which, again, I'm not a part of the app. If they post, I think it's a good idea. That's on them. I told them, I was like, I wouldn't if you want to take down the questions because you think you could have done a better job asking them, take them down. But if you're taking them down because a bunch of people are giving you shit for it, I'm not sure that's a good enough reason to do so.
100%. So, I mean, like, again, if you're releasing something exclusively to Winnipeg, or again, I don't know for sure, but like from the optics of it all anyways, it looks as though it was majority, like the testers, the release of it all, the merch, all that stuff, it seemed very predominantly based in Winnipeg. You got to expect this. And like, you already had this tumultuous relationship with Winnipeg Twitter because you made a claim off just roasting people. So you gave them the opportunity that when you were down, that they would come for you. And again, and I even told him too, when he kind of stepped away from Twitter, I'm like, why? You're letting these guys get to you? Like, these are all just fucking egg accounts. Like, for the most part, even the ones that aren't egg accounts, they're eggs in real life. They're fucking hard-boiled eggs. So it's like, why are you even letting this affect your day to this extent? But I mean, again, everyone is their own person. You know, we can't coddle anyone. I'm gonna get my flack. You're gonna see how I react to it or whatever, and it is what it is. Like, people are always gonna have their opinions from the outside looking in, but like, I don't know. I wish the guy nothing but the best. I think he's a talented comedian. I think he's a great guy. And I think the app definitely has potential, but like, I hate to see people feeding into the negativity. It just seems like it's a lost cause.
Yeah, because what does it help, right? Like, if you want to stand firm, the time to take away from the app is once you're done hitting tweet, phone down. That's the time you take away, right?
For sure.
So, I mean, anyways, I think I need to ask you two questions because that's what I always do on this thing, on this podcast. Anyway, I forgot to do that once. So the first question I'll ask you is, what's something that you've learned recently?
Not to release an app in Winnipeg, dog. That shit is not. That is not it. That is not it in 2021. That's actually one thing that I've learned recently is do not use Winnipeg as a test market.
Yeah, that's a very good thing to learn, especially with Twitter and the hounds. The hounds are out, man. Dude, I even had one of my friends send me your shit, and they're like, look at this fucking idiot when you were getting canceled. And I was like, oh, I love that guy. They're like, what? I'm like, yeah, he's funny. And they're like, why? I'm like, they're like, but he's fat phobic. I'm like, he's making a joke. Like,
and first of all, this whole fat phobia thing, like, and I know you're trying to wrap this up, but
yeah,
look,
no, go on.
So here's actually what I said, and this is what the thread was. They were like, oh, this person who's supposedly, you know, supposed to be body positive or whatever is over here talking badly about somebody else's body.
Oh my God, I remember that.
Right? Right. So I came in and said, that's weird. I can't picture either of you in the gym. And then they were like, or I was like, no, I said, I was like, I can't picture this taking place on a treadmill. And they were like, when did I ever say I was on a treadmill? I was like, well, the joke went over your head. What I was trying to say is that I can't picture either of you in the gym. So it wasn't even anything that I said where I'm like, this person is fat. You could have interpreted that however which way you wanted to, right? But obviously, you know, there was some people who were like, this shit's funny. This is funny. And what was interesting to me is like just seeing the people who were like, kind of like in the back end, kind of cheering me on, being like, yeah, you finally said something. But it's just so funny to me because it's like, you guys put this person to where they're at, and then you're so quick to try to take them down. I'm just some random motherfucker who comes in here and says some shit, and you all, like these fucking vampires or zombies and shit, just all come for me and whatever else. So it's like, look, I'm not fat phobic. I'm fat right now. And I think fat is a spectrum. And right now I'm somewhere in that spectrum where I got a lot of COVID weight that I got to shed. So, I mean, look, I'm not, like, what is body positivity? You want to be positive about your body? How about we enforce healthy eating habits instead of just what somebody aesthetically looks like? Because a lot of the bodies that people are trying to praise and say like, oh, this body, whatever, it's like they might have some health risks. They might have some health, like all the people that you're praising for looking a certain way, they're all at high risk of catching and dying from corona because of their weight. So you really want to help these people out and you want to support them? Find healthy ways of promoting yourselves. And I'm not saying that like if you are overweight that you are unhealthy.
I think you're talking about the people that are like extremely morbidly, obviously extremely obese. Like,
right. And speaking of which, actually, and this is something that doesn't get talked about enough, why is it that there are so many plus size models that are women, but there are no men? What if I want to be a plus size male model? There's no limit to me.
Well, there are.
You want to fight something? Go fight for the male bigger guys. I want to be fluffy and successful.
Well, there are receipts of you on Twitter being fat phobic, so you'll never make it. But anyways, that's.
Listen, I said that I couldn't picture in the gym, and I also want to leave the gym. I'm envious. I want to be outside of the gym, eating the Doritos and.
Hey, just because you're outside the gym doesn't mean you're not healthy. There are guys who like working out outside. You can do the calisthenics gym, bro. That's the spot.
I'm not that guy. I am not that guy.
Not yet, you aren't.
But anyways, yeah, I'm fat phobic. I'm sorry.
I'll ask you this as well. What is something that you think is underrated that people should know?
Something that is underrated that people should know. I think no, I'm not gonna say that. It's a whole can of worms.
You can say it off air.
Yeah, I will. What's underrated that people should know? Oh, you know what? VR headsets for porn.
I've heard that. I've heard that's wicked.
The reason I say is that some of the immersive porn is a little bit overwhelming where like it's 360. So you're like looking around and like everything's happening and like the girl's super close and she's holding up like your own skeet in your face. And you're like, whoa, that's a bit much. But just the headset itself, just being able to kind of like, you can lay down on your side and just still have the screen project wherever you want kind of thing. It just makes it a better, like, because you can get a projector and it'll give you the same experience, but that's only on that one specific wall, as opposed to like where you're just kind of like, you can go anywhere and then just kind of lay and do your thing. So, and also you get two hands. So if you need two hands while you're pleasuring yourself, you got the headset on, you're doing whatever it is that you got to do, right? I got sensitive chocolate chips, so I might play with a chocolate chip and stroke my piece. So
yeah, it's you can't get off to a JPEG. I remember that clip too.
No, that is not me. Shout out to Famous. That guy has a nice pixelated image.
Yeah, the nice 360p. But anyways, let's wrap this up. Is there anything you'd like to say before you go?
Yeah, man. Stay the fuck off Twitter. Winnipeg, you're dope. Just act like it. And I got some cool content coming out with Six Buzz soon. And yeah, check out the Tall Dark and Ratchet podcast every single Monday.
Awesome.
And you stay blessed and take care of yourself and have a safe travel back to Toronto. We'll link up, hit a patio, and talk some more controversial shit.
Thank you, bro. I appreciate it. Let's debrief off air when I hit stop. But until then, this is us signing off on Heck of Final. Have a wonderful week, people. Peace.